Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast.
Happy New Year and go blue. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. On this, our first show of 2016, as we fight off a cold, we begin by looking back at Friday's outstanding win over a very good Florida team in the Citrus Bowl. Most analysts and fans expected we would see a tight game with defense ruling the day in Orlando. We were half right. Michigan's defense frustrated the Gators all day. And the Michigan offense, I think we can all agree this was their best and most complete effort of the season. On so many levels, it was a satisfying win, and it sets the table for what could be an even better 2016. We can hope anyway. On today's Game Day segment, Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner joins me with his take on the Citrus Bowl, the past season, Coach Jim Harbaugh, and much more. First, a few news and notes to get us started on this, our 7th year of covering Michigan athletics. Football talk is front and center this week. But in the coming weeks and months, we are going to give our other teams their due in what should be a very interesting winter for men's and women's basketball, hockey, wrestling, and much more. We'll still talk football with recruiting winding down, spring football not that far away, and let's face it, with Jim Harbaugh around, there is always something newsworthy to talk about. It's going to be an entertaining winter, and I hope you'll join me each week. I had a lot of positive feedback about our Michigan Man Extra shows in the fall, so we're planning to publish a new episode each month moving forward, and I'll give you plenty of a heads up when those are coming out. Today, though, our topic is the Citrus Bowl. It's been a long 7 years for Michigan fans, and those years have not included a reason to smile on New Year's Day when it comes to cheering on our Wolverines. Last Friday was different. It wasn't that we beat a good Florida team. It was that we imposed our will on that very good team. The SEC East champs, the team that played Alabama in the championship game. Next season will be here soon enough. Today, let's take another few minutes to enjoy what we witnessed in Orlando on Friday. Beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive joins me next here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Joining us on our Game Day segment this week as we recap that big win in the Citrus Bowl for Michigan beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. How are you doing, Nick?
Good, Mike. How are you?
Well, I'm not doing too bad. Fighting off a little cold here. Wondering, are you still down in Florida taking in some of that sunshine? Or are you back up here?
I'm back up. Yeah, done with the heat. Which it's cold out obviously up here, but it got a little too hot sometimes down there, which was a little bit too much. I think in late December, but we're all back here and ready for the off season.
Well, and it's amazing because that's one of the things that the staff, I'm sure, was concerned about. But you go from Michigan, which, hey, we didn't have bad weather up here in bowl prep, but you get down there and you're in the 80s, you have high humidity, and you wonder, hey, can the guys make that adjustment in a few days and, play an entire game without gassing out? And that was not a problem.
No, I think actually Harbaugh was happy that it was sort of uncomfortably hot, if you can believe that, in that, he had them... he had them do a lot when they were down there, I think, in terms of work. They practiced every day they were there, basically, I think, until Thursday they had off. But every other day they practiced and did it basically for as long as they could. And then they lifted and did some conditioning and did a lot of work down in the heat. So there wasn't much downtime. It was most of their time there was spent, outside in that heat. So I think they adjusted well. I think they played a lot of guys, too, so it never really seemed like a problem. They didn't ever seem to get worn out, so certainly a good week for Michigan, no question.
Well, Nick, when I was watching that first Michigan drive on Friday, all I could think was, where did that running game come from? In my wildest dreams, I did not think Michigan could run the ball against that Florida defense and do it all day, because that is it's better than a decent defense.
Well, it's a terrific defensive line and front seven. It's one of the better ones in the country in terms of being able to get into the backfield and cause some havoc. But Yeah, I know. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think the main thing was Davion Smith and Drake Johnson looked healthy. And for Drake Johnson, I think he looked as healthy as he has all year, probably the healthiest he's been since the end of the 2014 season before he hurt his knee again. And then Davion, I think, was as healthy as he had been since injuring his ankle and his foot basically after the fourth week of the season. So I think that he was nagged by something all year. Drake Johnson was obviously nagged by something all year. I think the fact that those guys were able to kind of gut it out and get better and take that 4 weeks and improve their health, I think that helped the run game out a lot. And I think that maybe that showed that the offensive line did have some holes opened that just weren't being found by running backs. But they certainly got themselves better too over those 4 weeks. But I think overall it was better health from the running backs, 4 weeks to heal, those types of things. I think Michigan had the benefit of that.
Oh, absolutely. Davion Smith ran like a man possessed. I don't think we had seen him run like that since the BYU game, and of course the high ankle sprain. And Jim Harbaugh, who doesn't hand out praise a lot, had some really good things to say about how hard Davion Smith runs, but he proved when he's healthy, he is just one tough back to bring down.
Yeah, the reason why he won the job coming out of camp was because he doesn't go down on the first hit. I mean, that's the offense. They wanted someone who could create yards after contact because there's going to be contact. It's not going to be something where they're asking somebody to be really quick or whatever to the outside and bounce plays or anything like that. It's you're running between the tackles and you're up the middle, and they wanted to find somebody who could run through tacklers. And he was, frankly, Davion's. I mean, maybe he's the only guy on the team that really does it, I guess, right now. He certainly is the best at it. Ty Isaac and Derek Green never really did that. So, Harbaugh really, really enjoys watching Davion run, I think. And I think that, you finally saw him look like the guy who, we saw, like you said, in that BYU game, in those previous games, even in the Utah game, a guy who ran really hard, even when it didn't look like there was much room, he was still able to churn something out of nothing. So, Davion, I think, got himself healthy and made sure to let anybody know that no matter who's coming in here next year, he's going to continue to compete for that starting running back job.
The biggest surprise to me, though, Nick, was that offensive line play, which you were talking about a moment ago. I was watching it very closely. That was my greatest concern going into the game, especially given how active and how good that Florida front was all year. And you have to give credit to the big guys. I mean, they not only played well for a couple of series, they moved that line of scrimmage all day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best they've played all year. I think that's fair to say, considering the opponent. And that's probably your biggest encouraging factor if you're Michigan, because I mean, you still got to get over the loss of Graham Glasgow. That's going to be one that's going to be really hard. I thought he was a terrific player all season. You can't really talk about any of their improvement without talking about him. I think he's the best center they've had since Dave Molk won the Remington there in 2011. I think Graham will play in the NFL. I think he was instrumental in helping fix their pass blocking issues and their communication issues and everything else. And over time, I think the running game looked like it repaired itself as well. But you still do bring back four other guys who've all started now and all had experience. Now the key for them is to do it consistently. They talked about that a lot. They thought they improved every week this season, but it was more, can you remain consistent? Can you stop, making mistakes, then making good plays and making mistakes and good plays and mistakes? They didn't really have many mistakes against Florida. None that lingered or none that bothered them. I think that was a big thing, especially for guys like Braden and Kalis inside. It was, can you play 60 minutes of, 11-man football, so to speak, and that's, you're making sure you're doing your job. You're not causing any plays to just blow up because you're missing an assignment. And I think you saw that's as good as it gets, against Florida. I mean, they played really well the whole game. The running game was there the whole game when they needed it. So certainly encouraging. They've got four guys coming back. They've got to find a new center, but to have 4 out of 5 back is certainly a good thing for Michigan.
Jim Harbaugh called Jake Rudock's performance nearly flawless, and it is impossible to argue with that, isn't it?
Yeah, the only way it would have been flawless, I guess, if he went 31 of 31. But he only missed, only had 11 incompletions, didn't throw any picks, never really seemed to get in any kind of trouble. Was completely in control of the offense. I mean, that's what it looks like the quarterback has mastered an offense. I mean, that Jake Rudock looked like he was a fifth-year senior who was playing in his final game after playing 3 years, in a system. In reality, as we all know, that's not true. He only had the 1 year, but he still It looked like he had that thing completely mastered, completely under control. I can't say enough about, and I don't know if I've ever seen Mike, a quarterback, go from where he was in September to where we saw him on Friday. I mean, I don't know if I've seen that kind of improvement. I mean, he was I think you could argue that he was, Nate Sudfeld and Connor Cook had pretty good years, but I think there's probably nobody after him that were better than Rudock. When you look at those numbers at the end, he was a top 3 quarterback in the league. Maybe top 4, I guess, if we're going to split hairs, but he was certainly one of the best starters in the league. Had the second best season a quarterback's ever had in terms of stats in Michigan history. Is, I believe, now in the top 10 or 15 or something in career passing numbers. So he's the second quarterback ever to get 3,000 yards. Just a phenomenal year in every way. And considering where it started, where he threw the 5 picks in the first 3 games, it looked like he was really lost and uncomfortable. And then you fast forward to where it ended. I mean, what a job done by all. And he gets most of the credit, obviously, because he's the one doing it. But it's just a terrific season for him. And, people ask about how did they get to 10-3, and how did they get to 10-3 after the 5-win season? Obviously Harbaugh has a lot to do with that, being the head coach, but Jake Rudock had an awful lot to do with that too. He needed a quarterback desperately. He was a guy who came in and did it, and he wasn't just a stopgap. He was a playmaker, and he was a guy who won them football games. And that's important to have, and they'll have to find another one next season and do it all over again. But the good part is for Michigan is that they know they can. They did it this time, so if they want to do something like that again with a 1-year rental, or maybe it's John O'Cord or somebody else on the roster, they can get them ready in 1 year and be ready to go.
Well, it has been just an absolutely amazing season for Jake. I mean, and when the season started, we were hoping he would be a serviceable quarterback. Then he became a record-setting quarterback by the end of the season, and now a young man who's saying he's going to set aside his studies and take a shot in the NFL. That is just an amazing couple of months.
Yeah, Harbaugh kept saying the NFL stuff earlier in the year, and I kind of just, I thought he was just, kind of waxing. I didn't really believe him until the last couple of weeks, though. And I went back and looked at everything and looked at how he played. I certainly think he'll get a chance. I don't know, where or if he'll be drafted or whatever, but I certainly think he'll have a chance, which is really saying something, because I mean, my goodness, what a journey it was for him. I'm sure coming into a brand new system. Remember, he didn't have spring ball, which people I think forgot. Walked into this cauldron. That is Michigan football, which is not easy, which is a very pressure-packed situation where every time you make a mistake, you got people bearing down on you from the outside. So that's not easy to handle, but he handled all of it well. He handled all of it perfectly, really. I mean, that's the most in control of an offense I've seen a Michigan quarterback from a passing standpoint anyway. I've never seen one since I've been covering the team, that in control of what's going on. And, a terrific benchmark, I suppose, for future quarterbacks in the Harbaugh era here after Rudock.
Well, when you graded out the performances in MLive after the game, you gave perfect marks to the receiving corps, and of course Jake was making some big-time NFL throws to them.
Mm-hmm.
But that secondary that our receiving corps was up against, no slouch secondary. They were very good, Nick.
Yeah, Vernon Hargreaves is going to be a top 10 pick. That game notwithstanding, I think that's some film he'd like to throw away. But he'll be a top pick. Jalen Tabor's a very good football player back there as well, and they were a top 10 pass defense. Jay Chesson just had his way, and most of it was right up against Hargreaves. And again, we just talked about the path that Rudock has taken in terms of improving. I mean, Chesson, he's right there with him. I mean, there's nobody else on the team that improved as much from start to finish that Jay Chesson did. I mean, it was one of those things where when you came into the season, you thought, well, they've got a pretty nice receiver in Darbo, and you don't know what else they have. And then by the end of the year, it looked like Chesson was their best offensive player. I mean, their best playmaker. He's certainly their fastest player. He proved that. Michigan found a way to get him in positions to make plays. I think he had 12 total touchdowns this year, 9 receiving, 2 rushing, and then the return score. So he was just a guy who he's always worked hard. He's always done what he's asked. He's always kind of gone above and beyond. And I think you see finally there what you take a guy who does all those things, you give him the proper coaching, and he's got some athleticism, and away he goes. And now he looks like a guy who comes back next year and is maybe an all Big Ten player coming into the season. He was obviously at the end of the year. So, a terrific year for him. From wire to wire, he and Darbo will be back. I get a lot of questions. I think a lot of people are confused at the rosters, but Darbo, Chesson, Jake Butt, all those receivers. They're not losing any of them. So all the receivers will be back. The only guys that won't be back are Puma and Carriage. So I guess from a receiving standpoint, so you get replaced fullbacks. But all the receivers are back. Cheston will lead the way there. Terrific performance by them at the end of the year, obviously. And then Cheston was just, can't say enough about it. It was quite a ride, and we'll see what he can do next year. The big thing is that he learned how to, click with a new quarterback in one season. I think he said the other day that, he's hoping that that'll give him an advantage in terms of, how to work with a guy this offseason because he knows he's going to do it again. So I think he'll have a leg up, and he'll certainly go into next season with receiving and tight ends being, strength rather than a question mark.
Well, the defensive line play had to be strong on Friday, Nick, and it was, and we knew that was sort of a mishmash of an offensive line for Florida. They really were short, I think, 6 scholarship players on the roster coming into the season. So you knew or you thought Michigan could control that line of scrimmage, but again, just like the offensive line, they did it all day, Nick.
Yeah, dominant. It was dominant all day, and that was really the thing. I mean, the only rushing yards that Florida got were, Treon Harris had broke a play and got into space, and Michigan's linebackers still struggled, to tackle in space. But other than that, the defensive front did its job. Big bounce back from obviously that's not Ohio State they're playing in Florida, but to get humbled as much as you did against Ohio State, and then 4 weeks later come back and dominate a football game, that's got to feel good for them, I'm sure. And again, they did it shorthanded. They did it without Glasgow. Obviously, Brian Monet's still out, and all those things. And they had to play a lot of different guys in there. They had to play Tom Strobel and Brady Pallant and Matt Godin because of the heat. You couldn't ask Wormley and Willie Henry and those guys to play the entire game. But when Wormley and Willie Henry and Taco Charlton and Maurice Hurst were in the game, Florida wasn't moving at all. And in the second half, you saw that all those 3 and outs. I think Florida had the ball for less than 7 minutes in the second half, so the starters played the entire time, and were just totally dominant. And again, we just talked about the receivers. This defensive line, Willie Henry is the only one that's still considering leaving. But even if he does, even if he goes pro, the amount of talent they're bringing back, and they get Glasgow healthy again, Brian Monet will be back healthy again, Wormley's back, Charlton's back, Hurst's back. And if they can finish off this recruiting push and sign Rashawn Gary, even if they don't sign Rashawn, I guess it's going to be a very good defensive line, possibly one of the best in the country. If everybody's back and you get Gary, maybe it's the best in the country. I don't know, maybe. But it was a dominant force this season at times when it was healthy. The best unit on Michigan's team, I thought, all year, and certainly has a chance to be exactly that again next season.
With us on our Game Day segment this week as we recap the Citrus Bowl win for Michigan is beat writer Nick Baumgardner from MLive. Nick, Jim Harbaugh said before the game or in bowl prep week that if Michigan won that game, this might be his most enjoyable season in football. He really seemed to enjoy coaching this team, didn't he?
Yeah, that was interesting to hear. It kind of came out of nowhere. He didn't really, I think he was actually asked the question he normally shoots down, which was compare the college to pro thing. We've heard that 1,000 times, but I think he was asked that at some point by somebody from Florida. And, you could tell he'd been thinking about it, that this had been a year that he really enjoyed, probably more so than others. Maybe it was juxtaposed against last season, which had to have been maybe his most uncomfortable year, frankly, that he's ever been a part of. So maybe that had something to do with it. But I think for the most part, all the things he talked about, just, the team itself, I think he really enjoyed them. They obviously bought into what they were selling. There was no resistance there. I think that helped out a lot. And then, if you followed it all year long, you got to see that he was basically allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. He was allowed to come in. There was no resistance. If he wanted to do something, they did it. If he didn't, they didn't. And that was it. And I think that, he was able to have his family here. His parents are here a lot this year, and they are moving here. Obviously, he got to coach with his son. He got to come back to Ann Arbor, which he's always cherished. Go work at Michigan, a place that means a lot to him. And there was no roadblocks. There's nobody in the way, telling him he's got to go through all this red tape to get his job done. And I think that's the one thing he hates more than anything else is when somebody's trying to interfere with what he's doing. And he didn't have any of that this year. He was allowed to just work. And I think when you look back on it here over the last couple of weeks, I think he made that determination that this was, as enjoyable a year he's ever had. And I think it was a lot of factors. And so that's certainly a good thing for Michigan. Obviously, he doesn't look like a guy who thinks he made a mistake. And looks like a guy who was certainly glad he made the decision he did. Didn't have any pause about it, and seems extremely excited about the future here and for however long he's in that captain's chair.
Well, when you and I talked, Nick, before the season, we both pretty much agreed 7, 9 wins would be a very good year. But more importantly, how the team was competing would be something to watch as the season winded down. And other than the Ohio State blowout, this was, I think, much better than any of us expected.
Oh, yeah, easily. I mean, it was, this was a team I thought the roster was a 7-win roster that finished with 10 wins. And I think that they got more out of this group, certainly than the last staff would have, and certainly than most other staffs would have. I think that these guys played above their heads for most of the season just because of the way they worked and because of how hard they played and how hard they competed and how well they were coached in terms of in-game management and everything else. And then, the big thing that I questioned all year, and I said this to a lot of people, and probably even you, Mike, was that regardless of win total, if they walked out of the season playing their best football, then this year was going to be fine. And that's exactly what happened. They played their best game in their final game, which means as the year went on, they improved a little bit more, and then they were playing at their best when the year ended. Now, you weren't in the spot you wanted, you weren't the playoff or anything like that, but over the last few years, this program had done the opposite. It would play okay at the beginning, and then by the end of the year, it would be a total mess, and they'd have to restart everything over again and tweak it and blah, 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 and on you go. That doesn't happen now. It's you're playing your best football at the end, and then that just allows you to just transition right into spring and the off-season conditioning without overhauling something or totally changing something or throwing something in the trash and starting over again. It'll be something that should be just a natural progression into next year, and that's the most important part, is that you hired Jim Harbaugh and you got a guy who can make a football team better, and that's it. You can make them, from where they are at the beginning of the year to where they are at the end of the year, they're going to be a better team, and that's ultimately the mark, in my opinion, of a great coach. The greater ones, I guess, do it consistently every year, and then we'll wait and see if that happens. But that was a big thing for me, is they played their best football in their last act, and they didn't lose a lot of guys, which means that they're bringing a lot back, and certainly a lot to build on, and a lot more hope for Michigan football at the end of this year than there had been the last few seasons.
Well, it's been a long time since we've had a very happy a New Year's Day watching Michigan football. Yep. It's been 7 tough years. I think Michigan fans would all agree with that. One lesson that we learned this year, or reminded of again, is how coaching can make a difference, Nick, at the college level. It is amazing.
Yeah, it's everything. I mean, I think sometimes at the pro level, especially in football, sometimes it can get overvalued. I think it can get over, whatever, because, those players at that level are all, so elite, and the playing field should be relatively even. So sometimes I think it can get a little overvalued there, but in college, it is so important, because not only is that coach picking the players, that are going to be on that team, that coach is developing those players from the ground level. He's doing everything for them. He's setting everything up, and he has his hand on everything. The job is so big, and it's so encompassing that, frankly, a lot of pro coaches are intimidated by these jobs because it looks like too much work for a lot of them. And I think people thought that about Harbaugh, but they thought that without really knowing him. And that's the part he actually likes the best. But it is. It's so important. I mean, there are games this season where Michigan scored touchdowns because the coaching staff did it for them. I mean, they put them in positions to make plays. It wasn't something where they had guys on their team that were just blowing by people. They didn't have, Jabril Peppers was their best offensive threat for most of the season, and he was a defensive player. I mean, it wasn't like you were this team just loaded with talent. You were just dropping the ball in their hands and asking Denard Robinson to run 80 yards for you to save you. That wasn't happening. They were coaching, and I think they were properly coached for the first time in 4 years. And again, nothing against Brady Hoke as a person. He's a great guy, but that job's too big for him. It was too much, and too much for a lot of people, frankly. But when you got great coaches, plural, because Harbaugh's not the only one, I think it certainly shows, and that's what you want. That's how you can recruit. That's how you get better every year. And right now, Michigan's looking like they're in a good spot.
Well, the final thought, Nick, even though Michigan fans are riding high now and should be, it's not going to be that long before the team is back on the field competing in March. And there's going to be a lot of competition, but the one we'll all be watching is that quarterback battle. That should be a lot of fun to watch, Nick.
Yeah, it'll be wide open again. It'll be we'll have to see if they bring anyone else in terms of grad transfer or whatever else, because that seems like it'll always be an option for Harbaugh if they have the space. So we'll have to wait and see if everybody's here that's going to be here. But for the most part, it'll be John O'Corn. Shane Moore says he's not going anywhere, so I would assume those two guys would probably lead the pack with Florida State maybe in there as well. But it'll be interesting to see. I think that John O'Corn was brought here for a reason. I think that they're pretty high on him, but all guys will get a chance. And it'll be an entire off-season deal. It'll be the whole thing again. It'll be, what did you do in the weight room in January? What did you do in spring practice? What did you do all summer? What did you do after spring practice? And then who wins fall camp? It'll be an interesting ride. And now I think we know what to expect from Harbaugh. We were around him for a full year, so nothing should be too surprising. The answer to that question is you should expect everything. You can't ever be surprised by anything with him because nothing's ever really off limits. So last year was a wild year. I think most people will be more comfortable with it this year. I think that's the important part on the team is that guys know what to expect. They know the expectation of them, and they know how they have to work. And I think that should make things much smoother this offseason and probably get them even more prepared to play next year.
Well, it's all going to be here before we know it, so let's take some time to enjoy what this team accomplished in the past season. Great year, and thanks to my guest today, Nick Baumgardner from MLive, and thanks, Nick, for joining us all season, sharing your thoughts on what was a very fun and interesting season. So as always, Nick, it's a pleasure to have you on the show, and in just a few short weeks, it won't be that long.
Yep.
We'll get you back on, and we'll talk some spring football and do this thing all over again.
Sounds good, Mike. Always glad to do it. Look forward to talking to you soon.
Wolverine Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, men's basketball is off to a strong start in Big Ten play. Last week featured a big road win against Illinois, and then a blowout win at home on Saturday afternoon against Penn State. This week it's back on the road. Thursday night we head to West Lafayette to do battle with an outstanding Purdue team. Tip-off is scheduled for 7 p.m. Michigan is 11-3 overall, and again 2-0 in the Big Ten. Sophomore Caitlin Flaherty hit a three-pointer with 27.1 seconds remaining to send the game to overtime, but the University of Michigan women's basketball team dropped a 77-69 contest to Indiana on Sunday afternoon at Assembly Hall. Flaherty led the way for Michigan offensively, scoring 20 points on 8 of 19 shooting, and Madison Rostovsky scored 9 points. Michigan was whistled for 31 fouls in the contest, resulting in an unbelievable 42 Indiana free throws. Michigan is back in home action Thursday, hosting Iowa at Chrysler Center. Tip is set for 7 p.m. For just $5, fans can get a ticket, hot dog, and a drink as part of the Triple Threat Thursday, so check it out down at Chrysler Center. Hockey jumps back into Big Ten play this weekend with a home-and-home series against Michigan State. Friday night's game will be played in East Lansing, with action getting underway at 6:30 p.m. at Munn Ice Arena. Then both teams head back to Yost for a Saturday night game, beginning at 7 p.m. Coach Red Berenson's crew is fresh off another strong performance in the GLI, where they beat Michigan Tech in the championship game. They are 11-3-3 heading into this week's action. Our free show apps are available from iTunes, Google Play, and the Windows 8 App Store. Follow us on Twitter at The Michigan Man, and like us on Facebook at The Michigan Man Podcast. My phone lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. You can also email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. I would enjoy hearing any of your Maize and Blue thoughts. That will do it for today. Remember to tell your Michigan family and friends about the show, and join us again next week. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone, and again, a very happy New Year to you. Until next time, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!